Are you considering doing ayahuasca or plant medicine? I'm going to speak a bit about my experience with the 12 ceremonies that I've done. So, this is going to help you if you're curious, if you want some more information. It's especially going to help you if you're in 12-step programs or have been, because I'm going to be covering it from that angle as well. I felt very guilty when I branched out and started experimenting with plant medicine. So, stay tuned. My name is Adam. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before we get started, I just want to let you know I'm doing free breakthrough calls. These are really excellent calls where we go over your vision for your life, what you want to create, what's stopping you, what's in the way. If you've already created it, what's blocking you from fully enjoying it, and then some steps you can take to make the best out of all of it. So, plant medicine. Okay. I was in 12-step programs for a few years. And in 12-step programs, they're not exactly generally open to ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms, mescaline, San Pedro, things of this nature. There's a bit of a stigma. I've covered that in other videos. I'm not going to get too much into it here. But the bottom line is that I started feeling like I wanted to do this, but I felt really guilty. I felt like I was maybe going to be getting loaded. I was going to be ostracized from the 12-step group. I didn't feel comfortable telling anybody. And one of the things that I also was concerned with was, well, where is this coming from? Because I had so much programming about being an addict and an alcoholic. I had so much programming that, if I wanted any substance whatsoever to change the way I felt, it's because I was an addict, which is complete bullshit. So what I did was I waited when it first came to me. When I first heard about it, I was like, oh my God, I want to do that, but maybe I shouldn't. I can't possibly do this. I'm an addict. I'm in the 12 steps. So I basically just paused. And this would be my advice to anyone who's in 12-step program and is thinking about doing ayahuasca. I would ask yourself this question. What is your intention? What is your intention in doing it? Is it to get loaded? Because ayahuasca, even if it is to get loaded, I still wouldn't say don't do ayahuasca because, as you'll find out, and I'll talk more about it, it's not getting loaded. But what is your intention? See, I was very, very clear that my intention was to heal. My intention was to expand my consciousness, increase my awareness, kind of reach other aspects of myself and dimensions that I knew I couldn't quite get to at that point in time without it. And I was like, well, this is a pure motive, but let me sit on it. So I waited. I waited for about a year. And it kept coming back to me. It kept calling to me. It kept going like, do this. Like, yes. I kept getting a yes. I kept getting a nudge. I kept getting a push. And eventually I was like, okay, I need to reach out to somebody and just ask where I might find this. And I was working with someone who was a healer at the time who, was helping me a lot, had my best interest at heart, and I trusted him. And I was like, hey, have you ever done this? And he was like, yes, I've done it a whole bunch of times. He's like, and I was like, do you think this would be good for me? And he was like, absolutely, but I didn't want to bring it up because you needed to be seeking and you needed to ask. So I ended up going with this person to do a few of my first ceremonies. He knew a group, he knew a shaman that he trusted very much. He held in very high regard. He kind of looked out for me, explained like what to expect and what I might, experience, so on and so forth. And so I went for it. I also at this time spoke to a couple other people that I knew in AA who I wasn't really too involved in AA at this point, but I had a roommate who was, and because I felt so guilty, I felt like I had to be accountable or something because I didn't even know what I was getting into. I didn't know there was no issue with it. So I told my friend, I was like, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not asking for permission. I just wanted to be accountable so that I'm not doing it in a secretive manner, right? So I go, and it was very scary at first because I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what was going to happen. All I heard about was how people would just throw up a lot. And I never liked vomiting. I've thrown up plenty of times in my life as a child, but I always hated the sensation of vomiting. So I was actually really afraid of the vomiting. And I didn't end up vomiting. And I was also just afraid of the unknown. So it's hard to like go through. I'm not going to go through all of the ceremonies because I don't even fully remember all of them anyway. But I will give you the gist of it. It's. I mean, if you've done a psychedelic like acid or mushrooms, you have some sort of an understanding of kind of what it's like. If you haven't, I'll tell you in a second. The important thing to know, though, if you have done like acid and mushrooms, but you did it back, when you were a teenager in your drug days, I would say this: you didn't know what you were doing. You didn't know how to use this stuff. You weren't aware enough. You didn't have enough self-knowledge or like healing energy activated within you to understand what was going on. A lot of times when we're teenagers and we trip on acid or mushrooms, we're just like, oh my God, like the walls are melting. Everything's all fucked up. I can't see straight. My mind is just, we don't know that we're actually traversing dimensions and connecting more into the moment, into consciousness. And when you're kind of sick and in trauma, then what happens is you activate more of the sickness and trauma and confusion. When your intention is to heal, that makes all the difference. What you do is you actually start to have things come up in order to heal. So if you've been on a healing journey for a little bit, then it's going to be a totally different experience. Now, when I first did it, I started to lose control, like of my mind a little bit. You kind of go into these other realms and dimensions, and the basic just thinking like that part of the brain has to let go a bit. And I had a tendency to resist this. This is kind of a pretty common tendency. We resist the unknown. We resist losing control. We resist letting go. And so my mind would kind of hold on very tightly the best it could for a long time. And there was a lot of fear. I basically just went through a lot of fear around everything. Just kind of connecting to consciousness, opening up my body, opening up my heart, opening up my energy. But after like a couple hours or so, what it tends to do is it takes you into the traumatic parts of yourself so that you have to face them. You might have like, a childhood memory come up. You might have a visual of, like a sort of dark energy that you need to turn and face. Some people have thrown up their addiction. They've thrown up the energy of their addiction. And after they do that, they're not addicts anymore. And there are plenty of stories out there like this. But the essence of ayahuasca is it just brings up the unconscious, dark, scared, angry, negative parts of yourself, and it shows them to you. And it makes you face them. Because you're expanding your consciousness so much that you can't sort of like dissociate and like wander around in no man's land like we do a lot of times when we're sort of semi-conscious. It amplifies everything so much on a frequency level that everything that you're resisting is right there in front of you. And this is one of the reasons why I would say not to worry about it if you're an addict, because the essence of addiction is instant gratification, right? It's like take the thing, get the high, and it's more of an escapist sort of intention. It's like you want to get the high and immediately you want to check out. Well, ayahuasca, it doesn't give you instant gratification. It gives you delayed gratification. It gives you an immense sort of, high, but it's a spiritual high. I don't even like calling it high. It just takes you to who you actually are after you go through your fear, your trauma, and after you face it. So it's not instant, and there's not a dissociation so much. Though you do have to be careful, because when we get into like trauma healing and stuff, like you do get blasted out into these other dimensions, and people can really disconnect from their bodies. It's really important, if you're going to do this, to find someone to help you come back into your nervous system and integrate after the journey, because it can shake you up a bit. So it's important to do it with awareness. It's important to do it with a guide. It's important to process it afterward. So what happened with me was just a number of stiff ceremonies over the course of a year and a half, where different levels of my shadow were shown to me. And what would happen is these layers would get thicker and thicker and thicker, and then eventually they'd pop. So after a few hours, it would dissolve, and I felt incredibly connected. It's hard to describe it in words, but essentially you just feel more like what you actually are, because all you are is consciousness and love. So I felt more connected to everybody around me. I felt like, a very deep love and sort of intimacy, not romantic intimacy, but connection to all of the people that I'd been on the journey with, to an extent. I remember there was this guy named Sam who I just liked instantly. And when I did the medicine, it was like there was just this instant sort of like soul connection with this person. And we had never really met before, but I just felt like I knew him, and I felt very comfortable and safe around him. And I remember just kind of sitting and hanging out with him and feeling this deep like knowing without even having to talk. There was just this sort of friendship vibe there. And this is very common. I felt a much deeper connection to the person who brought me to the ceremony. And I felt like I understood more like the nature of consciousness and the nature of reality. I felt like I understood more how everything really is frequency and vibration, and time is illusory. You have a very clear understanding of how time isn't real, because time somehow, we experience time through our mind, through our brain. And because it's like we're breaking everything up into sequences over a period of time, we have this like drawn out experience of things that are going on, because we're not fully in the moment. It's like ayahuasca, plant medicine, brings you so much more into the moment that you see it all as just happening right now. And I have had moments on ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms where I was thinking about tomorrow, and tomorrow didn't make any sense. It made no sense, because I understood that tomorrow was just now. Like the energy of tomorrow existed now. It's not something that you can describe very well. You kind of have to be in the state. Anyway, so after about 12 of these, I just felt immensely more healed, immensely more connected, immensely more conscious. And I had deep insights just as far as how the mind works, how the body works, how life works, how our energy works, how our interconnectedness works. And I also understood that what I was trying to do on drugs was simply kind of get to this place. I was trying to feel better, because your natural state does feel better. And I realized that my addiction, there wasn't anything really wrong with my attempt to use something to shift my consciousness. It was simply kind of like what I used, and the fact that I was doing it by myself from a place of trauma without any guidance and without like a healing container. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to feel better, wanting to feel like who you really are, wanting to feel like your spirit, wanting to feel interconnected. Now, the thing is, though, I also became very aware when I was done that the job that I had no longer served me. Partially because I had expanded so much on a frequency and vibration level. And then when I went back to work as a server, it's like I couldn't fit into that space anymore. I needed something that was like gentler and easier on my nervous system. And I was given a number of chances to get out, and I didn't really listen. And eventually I manifested just getting fired because I didn't listen to the impulses. But the important thing to understand when you do these ceremonies is that you will get guidance, you will get information, you will get insights into your life. Sometimes things that you need to do, sometimes actions you need to take, sometimes things will come up from childhood and heal. Sometimes grief. One time I spent the whole ceremony just sobbing over this one person that, this girl that I was in love with that just wasn't quite available. We'd been together for a little bit, and then she manifested her actual partner, and it just brought up all the grief right to the surface, and I released it through just crying the whole night. It does this. It opens your heart, and it really profoundly releases trapped emotions. But then you have to come back and integrate that into your human life. The thing I would say, if you have been in 12-step programs, is do this sparingly, and do it with the understanding that you're not going to be on ayahuasca in this spirit state all the time. It's about taking you a step there, opening you up a little bit more, and then coming back into the human and integrating what you've learned, applying it, taking action on it, reflecting on it, understanding that you are a spiritual being having a human experience, and you will connect more to being the spiritual being, but you will then be asked to come back to bring it into the human experience. That's where the escapism can come in, where it's like, I just always want to be the spiritual being all the time. Well, you are the spiritual being all the time, but you won't necessarily always be in a transcendental state of consciousness all the time. You have to, you kind of can, but it's about like leveling up slowly. It's like when you do ayahuasca, it raises your frequency, and then you kind of integrated that into the body. Your DNA upgrades, your brain upgrades, your body upgrades, and then you get closer to that elevated state of consciousness, but you can't go here and stay here the whole time. So it brings you up here, brings you back down, and then it starts to raise it a little bit at a time. But that's the integration part. That's the patience part. That's the applying the lessons part. That's the action part on in 3D. So that's the advice I would have. Definitely find somebody. If you can find a group that feels trustworthy, if you can find a friend that's done it before, if you're questioning whether or not you can do it because you're in the 12-step programs, I would say, I don't know what to say, because I know some people are open to it, some people are not. If they're not, it's just their path. They don't know. It's programming. There's nothing wrong with any of this stuff. I mean, the Native Americans have used this to heal for many generations. They've used it to heal like bad addictions, like methamphetamine addictions. There's nothing wrong with it at all. A lot of people just don't understand what it is, and they don't trust themselves, and it may not be right for them. So it comes down to like, what is your intuitive feeling about it? If it calls to you, listen to that, and then carefully, intelligently, practically take action to find a way to do this, and then come back down to earth and apply what you've learned. Now let me know if you have any other questions, revelations, breakthroughs. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Other than that, thank you so much. I look forward to next time. Peace.